I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I'm doing my November wrap-up. So I read a total of 6 full books this month, but first I'm going to talk about 2 that I DNF'd and 2 that I only read part of because they were essay collections. So we'll start with the DNFs and move on from there. So first up was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I started this back in October, and it was on my November TBR to finish. I was reading it on audiobook from Libby. However, I just found myself no longer in the mood for spooky reads. So this is about a well-to-do area in Charleston, South Carolina, and a housewife named Patricia Campbell, and some sketchy things start happening, and there's vampires. Obviously from the title. But I was really enjoying it. I liked Grady Hendrix's other book that I read, My Best Friend's Exorcism, but I wasn't in the mood for an audiobook anymore. I wasn't in the mood for a spooky read, so I put it down. I will pick it up again another time. But yeah. It's not that I didn't like it, it just wasn't the right time for it. That's the same case with the next book that I DNF'd, which is The Idiot by Elif Batuman. If you've been watching for a while, you probably know I've been reading this since late August. I mean, this is like a 400-page book, and I've been reading it for months. And that is ultimately why I am DNFing it right now. I am realizing this is, first of all, this is not a book that is meant to be read over the course of like 3 months. And I knew that I wasn't getting the full experience that you're supposed to be getting from it. It's not that I didn't like this. I was actually enjoying it quite a bit when I did have the chance to sit down and read it, which was almost never. So I've decided I'm just gonna DNF it for now, and I will pick it back up when I finally have time to just read it within a few days, because that's clearly how it is supposed to be read. This is the story of Celine, who is a first year at Harvard University, and she is just kind of getting used to things. This is about her finding her way at college, and it's definitely something I'll enjoy. I need the time to sit down with it, and I didn't have that. All right, on to the books that I read parts of because they were essay collections, and these both count for Nonfiction November, which was this month, an event hosted by Olive from A Book Olive, where you read nonfiction in November. So these are for my exams. Naturally, everything else is for my exams for this month. Oh boy. This one is The New 19th Century, Feminist Readings of Underread Victorian Fiction, edited by Barbara Leah Harmon and Susan Meyer. I read, 6 or 7 essays out of here on various books that are underread novels by women, including Margaret Oliphant, Mary Augusta Ward, who else was in here? Geraldine Jewsbury, and a few others. Marie Corelli, was she in here? I don't actually remember. Sarah Grand. You'll see why I can't remember who was in what book in a moment. But yeah, this was very good. I don't rate books that I only read parts of, but I took notes on it, so even though I kind of don't really remember what I read, I can look back and I'll know what I read. And then the other one has no cover because it's a library book. This is Victorian Women Writers and the Woman Question, edited by Nicola Diane Thompson. And that is why I'm not sure which authors were in which book, because they were, a lot of them, dealing with the same thing, which was underread women writers, because why else would I be reading it? Again, also very good. I had read a few essays in here before, particularly the one by Thompson on opening the canon, and then one on Margaret Oliphant and one on Ouida. But yeah, very helpful. Again, I took notes because I was smart this time. Moving on to the books that I read in full and therefore have ratings for. This first one was kind of a leftover from Victober that I just didn't get to finish. And it ended up being my favorite book of the month, and a new Victorian favorite. This is The Woodlanders by Thomas Hardy, and move over, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. There is a new favorite Hardy in town. This was fantastic. This is the story of Grace Melberry, who returns home to her woodland town. Her father is a timber merchant. She has been away at school, where she has kind of been raised above her station a bit. And so the woodsman that she was childhood sweethearts with, Giles Winterbourne, doesn't really seem entirely appropriate for her to marry anymore. And then enter Dr. Fitzpierce, who is a doctor who has moved to the area recently and who is very charming, and you know, it's more of a love pentagon. I think there are 5 members of this love shape. Grace, Giles, the doctor, oh my god, Lady something or other. Not Lady, Mrs. Charmond, who is a wealthy woman that lives in the area, and then Marty, who is a girl that is poor. So yeah, love pentagon. I adored this. I always really like Hardy when I read him, and I don't read him enough because I find him depressing, even though he's really good. This one, I had thought this had a happy ending. It does not have a happy ending, but it is not as depressing as Tess of the D'Urbervilles or Jude the Obscure. I don't think many things are as depressing as Jude the Obscure. Thank God. But, so while it's not a happy ending, it's not entirely a sad ending. I really enjoyed this. I love the relationships between the characters. I loved it. I love Hardy's descriptions of nature. Ugh, such beautiful descriptions of nature in here. So I gave this 4.5 stars, and the only reason it's not 5 stars is actually the ending. There's something that happens at the end that I was just like, oh, come on now. It seemed a little ridiculous. And, I'm usually fine with a little ridiculous, but it just seemed, it seemed like it was going to be a bigger deal than it was, but it ultimately wasn't. But it did push the characters toward the ending. I'm not explaining this well because I don't want to spoil it too much if you don't already know the story. But yeah, the ending I was a little bit meh on. The actual, the final page and the final line I really liked a lot, but that's just the endings for one of the main characters, and I'm like, I don't buy it. But absolutely adored it. 4.5 stars. Next up was another read for Nonfiction November, and this was for my feminist theory list. This is On Lies, Secrets, and Silence by Adrienne Rich. This is the second book by Rich I have read for this year and for my exams. I read Blood, Bread, and Poetry earlier. Again, this is a collection of essays on women writers, being a woman poet, being a lesbian. There's an interesting essay on toward a woman-centered university. There's a lot more about individual female authors in this one than there were in Blood, Bread, and Poetry, which I really like because, she's got an excellent essay on Jane Eyre in here. Also essays on Emily Dickinson, Anne Sexton, Anne Bradstreet, and a few others. And then there's another very excellent essay called When We Dead Awaken, writing as something, I can't remember the title. When We Dead Awaken, writing as revision. That is a pretty famous essay in feminist theory that I had read before, but I'm glad I got to reread it. I gave this 4 stars. I really like Adrienne Rich. She's not perfect, but it was a very good read. All right, and there the Goodreads end. The rest of the month was a bit of a disappointment. Next is one that was not on my TBR for Nonfiction November, but it does count. This is Confessions of an English Opium-Eater by Thomas de Quincey. It is recounting his opium addiction, basically. And I don't know. I couldn't bring myself to care. I don't know. I wasn't enjoying it. I was like, no, I don't care at all. I gave it 2.5 stars because I really heavily skimmed this, so I don't think it's fair for me to give it too low. But the parts that I did read, I was just like, I don't care. This was for my long 19th century list. I'm not big on the romantics in general. I'm like, I don't want to read about a guy doing opium. No. Next up was another nonfiction that has no cover because it's a library book. This is New Women, New Novels, Feminism and Early Modernism by Anne Artis. So this is another book about new women writers. I have been reading a lot of them recently, and that is probably why I only gave this one 3 stars, because I feel like I had just heard it all already, even though I'm pretty sure this is one of like the first studies that was done on the new women writers. So I read like the later ones first, and they were all quoting Anne Artis. But I was just like, it was nothing particularly new that I didn't already know about. There were some interesting things, but overall I was just kind of nah. I gave it 3 stars. And the next one is another one for the long 19th century list, and it's another from the Romantic period, so I'm just not liking them. This is The Missionary by Sydney Owenson, Lady Morgan. This is a fairly recently rediscovered, so therefore underread, novel that deals with a missionary in the 17th century going to India. And I don't know. I just didn't like it. First of all, it's like there's a lot of just really long periods of description. And I was like, okay, can we just move along? And also, I mean, the colonialism factor is kind of yikes. So this deals with, I don't even remember his name. He's almost always just referred to as the missionary or the Christian. But he's from Portugal. He's a priest of some kind. And he comes to India to, be a missionary. And he meets this prophetess named Laxama. And at first he's just trying to convert her. But she falls in love with him. And then he falls in love with her. And it all gets very messy. There is a good plot in here. I don't know. It wasn't my jam. I didn't like it. I didn't really like the writing style. And it just felt like it was dragging, even though it's actually a very short book. Most of this stuff in here is just like the introduction and notes and stuff. The actual book is only this much. So it's not very long, but I don't know. I'm just like not in a reading mood for classics at this point. So I think some of these lower ratings are because I am just very burnt out. But I gave this 2 stars, heavily skimmed it. But I think I paid enough attention to get the plot. Whereas like with Confessions of an English Opium-Eater, I couldn't really tell you anything about that. But this, I got the plot. I just wasn't enjoying it. Last up, one that I was reading for 37 days. This is The Daughters of Danaus by Mona Caird. This is a new woman novel focusing on Hadria Fullerton, who wants to be a composer, but she ends up being kind of tricked almost into marrying, I don't remember his name, but And she is unhappy in her marriage, not because her husband's a bad person, but because she just wants freedom that she can't have. So if you've watched a few other videos, you might know that I got halfway through this, actually over halfway through this, and realized I'd absorbed nothing, and then decided to go back and start it over again because I thought I would really like this. And there are aspects of this that I really like. It just started to really drag. This is a 500-page book, over 500 pages, I think. And it dragged for me. I ultimately gave this 2.5 stars because even though I was writing down tons of quotes about the condition of women and all of that kind of stuff, but I had a very hard time connecting with the characters themselves. And it was just, I wasn't enjoying it. It was dragging. I didn't connect with any of the characters or feel anything for any of them. I don't need to like a character in order to like a book. My favorite book is Wuthering Heights. But I do need to care about them to some extent and feel some kind of connection to them. And I just didn't have that here. So it was more like it was just preaching feminism at me, which, I agreed with a lot of it, but as a novel, I didn't really like it. So 2.5 stars. All right, and those are the books that I read, or in some cases did not read in November. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you read any of these? What did you think? What did you read this month? It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.